The snow fell relentlessly, each flake sharp against the skin, a constant reminder of the battlefield's merciless chill. Captain Alina Vetrova pressed herself against the ridge, rifle clutched tightly, eyes scanning the horizon. Her squad had been ambushed hours ago, scattered across the frozen expanse, and every second counted. The wounded groaned behind her, muffled cries that pierced Alina's heart. She couldn't abandon them, not now, not ever. Her breath fogged in the icy air as she adjusted her position, keeping low, careful not to draw attention. The enemy was close, their silhouettes barely visible through the blizzard, moving with practiced precision. "Stay with me," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her hands ached from holding the rifle, and her boots were numb from the freezing snow, but she forced herself to stay focused. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement mattered. She crawled toward Corporal Mika, who had been hit in the leg during the initial attack. The wound was severe, blood soaking through his uniform and into the snow. Alina pressed her gloved hands against the injury, trying to stem the flow, her mind racing with possible extraction strategies. "Hang on, Mika. I won't let them take you," she muttered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The cold bit into her cheeks, but she ignored it. Survival meant sacrifice, and Alina had already made her choice. Above, the enemy moved closer, and Alina could hear the faint sound of rifles being raised. She weighed her options quickly, calculating the risks. She could retreat to save herself, but the thought of leaving her comrades was unbearable. Instead, she repositioned, using her own body as a shield over Mika, forcing herself to blend with the snowy terrain. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every flake that fell seemed heavier, each sound more pronounced. The enemy's presence was a constant pressure, a shadow pressing in from every side. Alina's fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of staying alive while protecting another. Suddenly, a shot rang out in the distance. Mika flinched, and Alina's heart skipped a beat. She returned fire instinctively, carefully aiming to suppress the advancing threat without exposing their position too blatantly. The world had narrowed to snow, blood, and survival. Hours seemed to pass like this, a relentless test of endurance. Alina's muscles screamed with fatigue, her lungs burned with every shallow breath, and yet she refused to falter. Each decision carried the weight of lives dependent on her courage. Somewhere behind her, other squad members were struggling, voices shouting instructions, warnings, and cries. Alina ignored them for a moment, her focus entirely on the wounded beneath her. She knew the enemy wouldn't wait. They never did. But leaving Mika now would be unforgivable. Her eyes darted constantly, tracking movement in the storm. She spotted a shadow, then another, and quickly aimed and fired. The sound echoed across the frozen battlefield, a deadly rhythm punctuated by the groans of the injured. Each shot was precise, deliberate, a promise that she would not let the enemy claim her friends. The wind howled, snow stung her exposed skin, and fatigue clawed at her every limb. Yet she remained, resolute and unyielding, refusing to let the cold, the fear, or the enemy break her spirit. In this frozen hell, Alina's courage burned hotter than the fiercest fire, a beacon of determination that refused to waver. By the time the sun dipped low, the storm had only worsened. Visibility was near zero, and the snow was turning the battlefield into a silent, treacherous white wasteland. Alina shifted slightly, carefully repositioning herself to cover two more fallen comrades. She could feel the enemy closing in, each crunch of snow under their boots a warning. "Alina!" shouted Lieutenant Kira from a ridge above, her voice strained. "We need to retreat! We're surrounded!" Alina shook her head, refusing to answer. Retreat meant abandoning the wounded, and she had already sworn she wouldn't do that. Instead, she shouted back, her voice carrying over the wind. "No, we stay! We cover them!" The enemy had started flanking, their movement calculated, like predators circling a weakened herd. Alina adjusted, using the uneven terrain and snowdrifts as cover. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a test of timing and nerve. She crawled closer to Corporal Jansen, who had been pinned down by sniper fire, pressing her body over his as the snow whipped against her face. Her rifle's weight was relentless, but she kept firing suppressive shots at approaching enemies, her aim true despite the cold and exhaustion. Every pull of the trigger was a promise. She would not leave them. A sudden explosion to the left sent snow flying, and Alina felt the ground shake beneath her. Shrapnel scattered dangerously close, forcing her to dive deeper into the snow. Her ears rang, and for a moment, the world became a white blur punctuated by pain and chaos. But she pushed through, crawling to the next fallen soldier, covering them with her body as bullets struck nearby. Hours passed in this relentless cycle. Move, cover, fire, protect. The cold had seeped into her bones and her hands were numb, but her resolve never faltered. She whispered words of encouragement to each wounded soldier, offering warmth, guidance, and comfort in a battlefield that had none. The enemy attempted a direct assault, charging across an open snowfield. Alina's eyes narrowed. She fired with precision, her shots finding targets despite the blizzard's fury. The attackers faltered, giving her squad precious seconds to regroup and tend to the injured. Time and again she refused to move until every wounded soldier was safe and accounted for. Her body ached, every muscle screaming in protest, but Alina's mind remained razor-sharp, her heart unwavering. This was more than a mission. It was a testament to loyalty, bravery, and unyielding human spirit. As night fell, the battlefield quieted slightly. The enemy momentarily repelled. Alina finally allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, to assess the situation. The snow was deep, visibility nearly gone, but her squad was still alive. Every life saved was a victory. Every heartbeat protected a triumph. Even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, Alina's gaze swept across the snowfield. She knew the enemy could return. That danger was far from over, but she had made a choice. She would not leave the wounded. Not now, not ever. Her hands, frozen and raw, clutched her rifle with renewed determination. The storm around her was merciless, the enemy relentless, but Captain Alina Vetrova had made her stand. And in the cold, silent night of the snowfield battlefield, her courage burned brighter than any enemy fire. The blizzard showed no mercy. Snow whipped across the battlefield in blinding sheets, turning the terrain into a treacherous white canvas where every shadow could hide a threat. Alina's muscles were on fire, fatigue gnawing at her bones, yet she forced herself to stay upright, scanning the horizon with sharp, alert eyes. The enemy had regrouped and their flanking maneuver was now complete. They were closing in from all directions. She tightened her grip on her rifle, her fingers raw and numb, the cold biting like knives. Corporal Mika groaned beside her, blood still seeping through makeshift bandages. "We can't hold them off forever," he whispered, voice trembling, fear lacing each word. Alina shook her head. "We don't have to hold forever. We just have to survive long enough for the extraction team. Stay with me. I won't let anything happen to you." Her tone brooked no argument. It was a command born of unbreakable resolve. The enemy advanced in formation, a wave of shadowed figures moving like ghosts through the storm. Alina calculated every step, every movement, repositioning herself and her wounded comrades. She crouched low, using snowbanks as cover, and fired precise, controlled bursts that forced the attackers to halt, if only briefly. Each shot was a promise. She would not yield, she would not abandon anyone. Suddenly, a flanking squad appeared to her left. Alina's heart pounded as adrenaline surged through her veins. She fired, each shot purposeful, targeting legs, arms, anything to slow them. The enemy faltered under her deadly accuracy, but more kept coming. There was no time to breathe, no room for hesitation. Nearby, Corporal Jansen screamed, caught in a sudden crossfire. Alina dove, dragging him behind a snowdrift just as bullets kicked up snow around them. The storm masked some of the enemy's approach, but it also reduced visibility for Alina. Every sense had to be heightened, every instinct sharpened. She listened for footsteps, felt vibrations through the frozen ground, and tracked movements in the white haze. Hours felt like days. The snow continued to fall, relentless and heavy, covering blood, footprints, and the traces of their struggle. Alina's limbs shook, her muscles quivering from exhaustion. But she refused to let the enemy detect weakness. Any sign of hesitation could cost lives. She whispered instructions, reassurances, and encouragement to the wounded, lending them the courage they needed to endure. At one point, the enemy nearly broke through her line. Bullets zipped past, shattering the snow, spraying the frozen earth around her. Alina returned fire with deadly precision, forcing them to retreat, but she knew this temporary success was only a reprieve. They were encircled, and the next wave could come at any moment. Even as fatigue threatened to overwhelm her, Alina remained relentless. She shifted her position to cover a wounded teammate crawling toward her, using her own body as a shield once again. Each movement was deliberate. Each decision weighed against the lives depending on her. She refused to let fear dictate her actions. Courage had to lead. The wind howled, carrying the enemy's approach like a warning siren. Alina's teeth chattered as she whispered into the snow, "Stay with me. Just a little longer." Her voice was both command and comfort, a lifeline in the frozen chaos. Hours merged into a brutal, exhausting rhythm. Fire, snow, blood, and determination blended into a seamless dance of survival. And through it all, Alina held firm, her will unbroken, her spirit indomitable, refusing to leave the wounded behind no matter the cost. The blizzard intensified, the storm now a roaring white wall that reduced visibility to mere feet. The enemy pressed forward, relentless and organized. Alina's squad had been whittled down, each member wounded, exhausted, and leaning on her courage to endure. She could feel the weight of responsibility crushing her chest, but there was no room for doubt. "Alina, we can't—" Mika's voice faltered, fear evident in his eyes. "No," she interrupted, her voice firm, unwavering. "We can and we will. Just stay low. Stay with me." Her hands moved quickly, checking weapons, bandaging minor injuries, and keeping morale from collapsing. Every heartbeat mattered, every second counted. The enemy launched a coordinated attack, charging through the snow with rifles aimed, faces obscured by cold weather gear. Alina fired, each round precise, forcing them back, but more kept coming. The sound of gunfire echoed across the frozen battlefield, mingling with the whistling wind and the groans of the wounded. She crawled to Corporal Jansen, who was pinned down near a shattered ridge. Bullets ricocheted off the icy ground as she pressed her body over him, returning fire while simultaneously assessing his injuries. His leg was shattered and the snow around him was dyed crimson. Alina's hands were trembling, but her resolve was unwavering. "Stay still. I've got you," she whispered, her gloved hands applying pressure to slow the bleeding. Her eyes darted constantly, tracking enemy movement, predicting the next strike. Every action was calculated, deliberate, a dance between life and death. Suddenly, a grenade landed nearby. Alina's instincts kicked in. She dove forward, shielding Jansen with her body as the explosion sent snow and debris flying. The world became a blur of white and fire, and for a moment, everything slowed. But when the smoke cleared, she was still alive, still fighting, still refusing to abandon the wounded. The enemy regrouped, realizing brute force wasn't enough. They began flanking, attempting to surround Alina and her remaining squad members. But she was ready. Using the storm and the uneven terrain to her advantage, she repositioned quickly, taking shots that forced them to pause, creating crucial space for the wounded to move. Hours had passed in a relentless cycle of attack and defense. Alina's body screamed with exhaustion, her fingers numb and raw, her lungs burning with each shallow breath. Yet she remained resolute. The thought of leaving her team behind was unbearable. She had made a choice, and she would see it through. Finally, as the first faint light of dawn broke through the storm, a distant sound reached her ears, the rumble of approaching extraction vehicles. Alina allowed herself a brief moment of hope, knowing the end was near, but understanding the danger was not yet over. She had kept her squad alive this long, but the final moments would demand everything she had left. Her eyes scanned the horizon, calculating paths, assessing enemy positions, and ensuring that every wounded soldier could reach safety. Each step, each action was precise, a testament to her training, courage, and determination. Alina had refused to leave the wounded. And now, as the distant engines of the extraction vehicles grew louder, her unwavering resolve would ensure they all survived to see another day. The first rays of dawn cut through the lingering storm, casting pale light on the frozen battlefield. Alina's body was a bundle of aches and wounds, each step heavier than the last, but the sound of engines in the distance ignited a renewed surge of energy. The extraction vehicles were approaching, and the final moments of this deadly ordeal were at hand. She helped Corporal Jansen to his feet, supporting him under one arm as she scanned the snow-strewn horizon. Enemy movement had slowed with the fading storm, but they were still dangerous, still lethal. Alina knew the extraction wouldn't be easy. Every second they lingered increased the risk of attack. "Stay close," she whispered to the remaining squad members, eyes narrowing as she calculated the safest path to the extraction zone. Snow crunched underfoot, masking some movements but also threatening to reveal their positions with a single misplaced step. The team moved as one, each soldier following Alina's lead, trusting her unshakable resolve in this frozen chaos. Bullets suddenly cracked through the thinning storm, kicking up shards of ice and snow. Alina reacted instantly, diving low and dragging Jansen behind the cover of a ruined wall. She returned fire with precision, her rifle steady despite exhaustion, keeping the approaching enemy at bay. Each shot was deliberate, a protective shield for those relying on her. The extraction choppers loomed closer, their blades cutting through the air, scattering snow and debris. Alina's heart raced as she calculated distances, angles, and the safest approach. The wounded were struggling, but she refused to let anyone lag behind. She adjusted bandages, checked weapons, and pushed her team forward with a combination of command and encouragement. An enemy sniper revealed themselves atop a distant ridge, and Alina's eyes locked onto the glint of the scope. She whispered a warning to the squad and took a careful shot, neutralizing the threat without drawing undue attention. Her movements were precise and controlled, a testament to her training, despite the fatigue threatening to overwhelm her. As the team approached the extraction point, enemy reinforcements emerged from the remaining cover. Alina's instincts kicked in, positioning herself between the wounded and the attackers. She moved like a shadow, firing controlled bursts, forcing them to retreat. Each maneuver was calculated, ensuring her team could advance without taking additional casualties. Finally, the lead extraction vehicle landed, dust and snow spiraling in chaotic clouds. Alina directed the wounded and remaining squad members toward it, guiding them with firm commands and gentle reassurances. One by one, they were helped aboard, the warmth of the cabin a stark contrast to the frozen battlefield outside. Alina climbed aboard last, scanning the terrain for any remaining threats. Her body ached, her muscles screamed, and the cold still bit at her fingers and face. But she allowed herself a moment of relief, knowing that she had refused to leave a single wounded soldier behind. The team was alive, intact, and ready to be evacuated to safety. The extraction chopper lifted off, snow swirling beneath the blades as it rose above the battlefield. Inside, the squad huddled together, bandaged, exhausted, and silently grateful. Alina remained alert, eyes scanning the horizon, yet a sense of accomplishment began to seep through her fatigue. They had survived. She had kept her promise. Corporal Mika, now seated and shivering, looked at her with awe. I can't believe we made it," he whispered. Alina offered a faint, tired smile. "You made it because you stayed with me. We made it because we didn't give up." The wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, the warmth and hum of engines provided a fragile sense of comfort. Medics moved through the cabin, attending to wounds and injuries, yet Alina remained on edge, constantly scanning, anticipating danger even as it receded. It was instinct now, etched into her very being after years of service. As they flew toward the nearest base, flashbacks of the night's battle flickered in Alina's mind. The snow, the gunfire, the screams, and the relentless enemy, they were all there, burned into her memory. Yet, alongside the terror and chaos, there was pride, courage, and an unbreakable sense of duty. She had refused to leave anyone behind. She had held the line when others might have faltered. Medics approached to examine her wounds, but Alina waved them off, insisting the injured be treated first. Her hands trembled from fatigue, her body ached, but her focus remained unwavering. Leadership was not about comfort. It was about responsibility, about doing what was right even when it meant personal sacrifice. Hours later, they arrived at the base. The squad disembarked slowly, aided by Alina and medical personnel. She ensured that each soldier received attention, guidance, and reassurance. Even as she finally allowed herself to rest, the weight of the mission and the lives entrusted to her lingered in her mind. Commanders gathered to debrief and commend the squad, but it was clear that the real hero of the mission was Alina. Her decisions, courage, and refusal to abandon the wounded had ensured survival against overwhelming odds. The team's cohesion, morale, and survival were a direct result of her relentless determination. Alina stood outside the base, looking at the snow-covered landscape where the battle had raged. The storm had passed, leaving silence in its wake, but the memory of the night remained vivid. She knew that the enemy would return, that dangers were never truly gone. But she had faced the impossible and emerged unbroken. Inside, the squad recovered, stories of bravery circulating quietly among them. They spoke of Alina's courage, her unwavering commitment, and the way she had carried them through the storm. And though she did not seek recognition, the respect and gratitude of those she had saved was a reward greater than any medal. In the quiet moments, as she tended to her own injuries, Alina allowed herself a brief reflection. Fear had been present, exhaustion had threatened to overcome her, and the weight of responsibility had been immense, but she had stayed true to her principles. She had refused to leave the wounded even as the enemy closed in, and that decision, that courage, had made all the difference. The base had provided temporary safety, but Alina knew this respite was fragile. Enemy forces would regroup, and retaliation was inevitable. Her mind raced as she coordinated with the remaining squad members, strategizing for the counterattack that would secure the perimeter and prevent further casualties. Every detail mattered: routes, cover points, lines of fire, and contingencies for the wounded. Alina's leadership was evident in her calm, deliberate commands. "Check your positions. Keep your eyes on the horizon. Watch for movement in the tree line," she instructed, moving through the base like a seasoned sentinel. Her squad followed, trusting her instincts, relying on her experience honed in countless operations. The first signs of enemy movement came at dusk. Shadows shifted along the ridgeline, distant figures moving with precision and intent. Alina assessed the threat quickly, marking coordinates and assigning fields of fire. She would not allow another ambush. She would be ready. She led the squad out, careful to cover the wounded with protective fire teams. The terrain was uneven, the snow and ice treacherous underfoot, but every movement was calculated. Alina's eyes scanned constantly, reading the subtle signs of enemy approach. Her breath was visible in the freezing air, each exhale a reminder of her vulnerability and her determination. Suddenly, the enemy launched a coordinated strike, artillery shells striking nearby positions with explosive force. Alina dove to cover, dragging Corporal Jansen to safety, her heart pounding in rhythm with the chaos around her. Bullets shredded the air, snow sprayed from nearby impacts, and the ground shook with the violence of the assault. Alina responded immediately, her rifle steady as she returned fire with precision. She moved among her squad, guiding them, encouraging them, ensuring the wounded remained protected. Every step she took was a balance of courage and strategy, each decision a lifeline for the soldiers depending on her. Hours stretched into the night as the counterattack raged. Alina's endurance was tested to its limits. Her muscles burned, her lungs ached from cold and exertion, and yet she did not falter. She coordinated reinforcements, set traps, and directed suppressive fire, all while ensuring the wounded were stabilized and kept out of direct danger. Amid the chaos, she spotted an enemy sniper attempting to flank the squad. With a precise burst, she neutralized the threat, saving several lives in the process. Her awareness, skill, and unwavering focus ensured the squad could continue their defense with minimal losses. As dawn approached, the enemy began to withdraw, leaving the battlefield eerily silent. Alina surveyed the scene, noting casualties and damage, but also the survival of her squad. They had faced impossible odds, and yet Under her leadership, they had prevailed. She allowed herself a brief moment of relief, knowing that the night's sacrifices had been met with victory, even at great cost. The first light of morning illuminated the base, casting long shadows across the snow-strewn terrain. Alina moved among her squad, ensuring the wounded were evacuated, supplies replenished, and defenses secured. The counterattack had ended, but the psychological toll was profound. Each soldier bore the weight of fear, loss, and survival, and Alina felt it too. Though she had little time for reflection, commanders arrived to assess the operation's outcome. Reports flowed in. The squad had survived, critical positions were secured, and the enemy had retreated. But behind the statistics lay the human stories, the bravery, the sacrifice, and the resilience of a leader who refused to abandon her team. Alina remained composed, directing operations and ensuring proper care for the wounded. Medics praised her efforts, noting her refusal to leave any soldier behind, her hands-on guidance, and her ability to maintain cohesion under extreme stress. She accepted the commendation with quiet resolve, knowing that recognition was secondary to the lives she had saved. In private, Alina allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of each soldier, each injury, each decision that had meant the difference between life and death. The snow-covered battlefield, the relentless enemy, and the exhaustion that had nearly broken her, these were now part of her story, etched into her memory forever. Her squad gathered around her, offering words of gratitude and respect. The bond forged in the crucible of battle was unbreakable. Alina nodded, her expression a mix of pride and humility. She had led them through the impossible, and they had emerged stronger, alive, and united. Later, as the sun rose higher, Alina stood overlooking the battlefield. The storm had passed, leaving quiet, frozen remnants of the night's chaos. She knew there would be more missions, more danger, and more decisions that could cost lives. But in this moment, she allowed herself to acknowledge her triumph, not just as a soldier, but as a protector, a leader, and a guardian of those who could not protect themselves. The story of that night would be told quietly among her squad, a testament to courage, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of a leader who refused to leave the wounded, even as the enemy closed in. It was a story of resilience, heroism, and heart. A story that would live on in the hearts of those who survived and in the legacy of Alina, the soldier who defied fear and triumphed against impossible odds. Alina walked back toward the base, every step a reminder of the sacrifices made and the lives saved. The battle was over, but the story and the honor would remain forever.